Hey everyone, it's Dylan and Charlie from the Black Forest Wood Company. This week we're working on a table with some of the most figured walnut we have ever seen. So like I mentioned, we were commissioned by this client to work on a table with some of the most incredible walnut. Specifically, this walnut had curly grain, which is this rippling effect you get in the wood grain that almost gives it a 3D appearance when it's finished. And it can be caused by a couple things. Number one, you can see it caused by compression, where you get a tree that's growing on an angle and it physically compresses and curls all those wood grains together. But it can also happen for no apparent reason at all besides a genetic mutation, where you get these trees that grow perfectly straight with no compression, but they'll be full of intense curly figuring. And that seems to be what happened to this tree here. This slab of walnut is fully figured all the way through with intense rippling, and arguably wood like this should probably have been set aside for guitars and musical instruments just because of the rarity and the quality. But we're using this full 3-inch thick slab to turn into one single table, even though you probably could have got like 500 guitars out of this slab.
Yeah, 35 drops. John told me it would be 1 drop per liter because that's what he did for the sample. There you go. We are at like 2 point something drop. Like, it's ridiculous.
This client has selected a really dark tinted black, so that's where you heard Jack explaining about all the extra pigment that he had to put into this piece. Typically for our tinted blacks, we only need to do like 5 to 10 drops, but because this client wanted it so dark, we had to just put a lot more of that in there. For this pour, as I'm sure you can imagine, we're using our Black Forest deep resin, and something a little different than you've been seeing us do recently is we're not doing a base layer pour for this table. So a lot of our clients request that we do a thin 1/2-inch thick layer with a base layer that's fully opaque to stop them from seeing all the way through the table. But in this case, we're doing a resin pour that's dark enough that the client isn't really going to be seeing through the table anyways. And even if they were, since this piece is primarily solid wood, we're able to hide all of our mounting plates beneath the wooden surface and not have to put any screws through the resin. Next up here, you're seeing us pour the extensions. So these pieces all came from one single slab. Essentially what we did is the bottom narrower half of the slab got used for the main dining table, and then the top wider section of the slab got cut in half to use for the 2 extensions, and we're pouring the exact same resin color for those pieces. After 1 week of curing in the mold, we can come back to the pour room and begin demolding these pieces. So I will talk a little bit about our mold construction that we like to use. Our bottom surface is a type of plastic that's called HDPE, which is short for high density polyethylene, and it essentially is just a white shiny plastic that cured epoxy does not like to stick to. And then for the outside edges, that's 3/4 inch MDF that we've coated in tuck tape for the same reason, in that cured epoxy is not going to want to stick to it. Now that the piece is cured, we can get it downstairs and onto our Avid CNC machine for flattening. So after the pour, you get a little bit of a layer that's left on the underside of your table, which is important to take off, because if you left that on and expose the top, you could have a piece that could potentially warp. But we also do an overpour on the top side of the table, like I just mentioned. And the reason for that is so that we can fill all the cracks and voids in with a single shot. We get asked often why we don't just pour up to the level of the wood, and simply because our most expensive cost here is labor, not the cost of epoxy. So it's cheaper for us to use more epoxy, fill everything in at once, as opposed to paying our guys more time to go and fill all those pieces in individually, one at a time. And then once the pieces are flattened, we can pull out the track saw and begin cutting them down to their final size. So like usual, and I've mentioned in the past, it's always important with the track saw to make your cut in multiple passes. So you can see we're only cutting about 1/4 of an inch at a time here, which doesn't seem like very much for a saw this big, but if you were to try and make this entire 2.5-inch thick cut in one shot, the blade would bind up, you'd get deflection, and it would likely result in you having to cut the piece smaller than you originally intended. Now, we have done some pretty tough testing on these saws. We did accidentally catch the saw on fire once when we were trying to cut through rocks, so obviously we weren't using it for its intended purpose. But if you were wondering, it will cut rocks, it might catch on fire, but it will work. Now that we've got the piece sized, we do like to add a small 2mm 45-degree bevel to the outside of our tables. This is what we call our standard bevel. If customers want, they can request a different edge profile, but we like this one in that it still maintains the nice sleek modern appearance, but it gets rid of that sharp corner so that if you're leaning your forearm on it, you're not going to have a big indentation or line there. Then we can begin laying out the extension hardware that's going to go on this table. So same as the extension tables we've done in the past, we use this T-slot extruded aluminum, and in combination with threaded inserts, those pieces can be slid onto the underside of the table, which can then allow you to slide an extension onto the end. Our threaded inserts come from Rampa, which are available on our website for purchase if you want to check them out. And we've tried numerous different threaded inserts, but we do find theirs to be the highest quality and work the best. Then once we've got all of our pockets machined for the base on the underside of this table, we can clean up those excess burrs, continue on to our final sanding, making sure that we have a perfectly even surface before we apply that oil. And then after that, we can get this piece taken upstairs and begin prepping for our Black Forest furniture oil finish. Before we apply the finish to this piece, however, we need to construct the matching table base that's going to sit underneath it. So you guys have seen us build many X bases before on this channel. However, almost all of them have been made out of blackened ash. So this client has decided to switch it up, and he's doing solid walnut to match the tabletop. Now, as you can imagine, this has added a considerable amount to the cost of this table. Walnut is almost like triple the price of the ash, and to find it in this size is a little bit more challenging. So we're being very careful with our machining operations here because we don't want to make any mistakes causing us to have to purchase a whole nother board of this walnut. But once we've got our joinery machined, then we can use a combination of Titebond 3 and some hardwood maple dowels just to get everything assembled. Titebond 3 is probably a little bit overkill for this application because it is technically an exterior rated glue, but we tend to do everything overkill around here, and it just gives us that peace of mind that this table base is never going to fail. Once the large X has been assembled, what you're seeing with CNC do here right now is machine the joinery on what we call the smaller X. So this X base essentially is just two X's, one bigger and one smaller, and then put together at a perpendicular angle. And now that we have the base, the table, and the extensions all prepped and ready for finish, everything is going to get lifted upstairs. Curtis is going to give it the once over for quality control, and then it's on to the application of the oil. So like I've already mentioned multiple times, we're using our Black Forest furniture oil for this project, and what you're seeing Curtis apply it with is a non-abrasive white Scotch-Brite pad. That is for a reason too. You could, let's say, go ahead and just use a paper towel, but the disadvantage to that is the paper towel is going to act almost like a sponge, and it's going to absorb a lot of the oil that you want to end up on your finished product. So the non-abrasive Scotch-Brite is much more porous, and instead of acting like a sponge which absorbs things, it basically is just a carrier where the liquid sits inside of it. You give a really light squeeze on the pad and it's going to let go of all that excess oil and make sure that it ends up on your project and not drying up in your paper towels. Another added benefit of using the Scotch-Brite to apply is it's safer, which might be surprising to some of you, but oil finishes can cause fires if you're not careful. So if you have a paper towel that you've used to apply oil and it's fully saturated in that oil and you leave it bunched up in a garbage can to dry, it can completely spontaneously combust and, in a worst case scenario, burn your whole shop down. I think it was Bourbon Moth. He recently did a video showing combustion times of different oil finishes, and it was honestly shocking because there's many of the big names that you've come to know that I have never experienced any combustion with, but he had the perfect, I guess, circumstances set up, and he was able to replicate this spontaneous combustion with oil. So best practice is to put your oily rags in a fireproof container, or if you do not have one, keep them outside, lay them flat, and even put some water on them so they're slightly damp while they dry. So Curtis here has applied the first coat of oil to the extensions, and typically that first coat of oil you're going to end up using a little bit more product because none of the pores are sealed yet. And then what you're seeing him do here is applying the second coat to the dining table. So this would be that case where it doesn't take quite as much because a lot of those pores are already sealed. Now, something we didn't end up filming here but was a challenge on this table, did end up being the finishing. Like we always mention, finishing is never easy, no matter how much you try or how many times you've practiced. The wood sometimes has an idea of its own and will introduce different kinds of challenges. So this particular piece, because of its curly grain, had different densities all over the place, so we were getting these dull spots and shiny spots. And I think after this video here, Curtis actually ended up sanding everything off and redoing it. But as you'll see at the end of the video, Curtis is a wizard and got it looking perfect. Okay, so now we are at the point where we want to apply our ceramic coating to this dining table, and I want to take a second to make an exciting announcement. We now have all of our ceramic coating products available for purchase for customers in the EU. Now, I'll specify, they were available for purchase before, but we now have a warehouse in Slovenia stocking all of these products. So you can ship just about anywhere in the European Union for less than 20 euros, which we feel is pretty good value compared to before when it was like over 100 euros to ship. So it's blackforestceramics.com. We'll put something on the screen here right now. We'll put it down in the description. But let's get to applying the ceramics to this table. So one of the big advantages of this coating is how easy it is to use. You simply just spray it on the surface, buff it in, and then wipe off the excess. So I'll demonstrate that and explain how it's done here today. And one thing I also like about it is it tends to bring out more contrast than our other coatings. If you want that higher gloss and higher contrast, this is the coating for you. And it is specifically rated for exterior environments. That's why we call it our marine coating. Okay, so when you're getting ready to apply these products, there's a base coat and a top coat, same as our other ceramic coatings. And you don't need the block or the little applicator cloths. All we need is the larger buffing microfibers. So we're going to start with the base coat today, and one of these microfibers is going to be my applicator cloth that I'm spreading it out with, and then my other is going to be my excess removal cloth that I'm taking off any excess ceramic. Same rules still apply. You want to work in about 2 foot by 2 foot sections, so we'll start with this. You want to shake up your product before you apply it on the surface, just because some of those solids can sink down to the bottom. And in each 2 foot by 2 foot section, you're going to want to do about 3 sprays is typically what I'm doing. Like I said, I'm going to use one cloth here to buff the product into the surface, and then I'll use my other cloth to take off all of that excess. Okay, so the base coat's done. All we would do now is we would come back and do another base coat, and then we would do another top coat, and that would be completed for the nano finishing on this table. In between coats, usually you should give it about an hour before you're applying that next coat, and then before use, give it 5 to 6 hours for light use, and then 24 hours for full use with liquid exposures. And in terms of maintenance and care on this, since you have the ceramic on your table, you can just maintain with the ceramic coatings. You don't need to do a full recoating of oil unless you get really, really bad damage. Now we'll head off to our client's home for the delivery. And this is my favorite part about the local builds, is that we get to go set them up personally and deliver them. So this client had a gorgeous home here in the city, and here we are lifting the tabletop in first, and then we like to get the base set up into its location. And we always find it easier to lift the base onto the top for these X bases, because we find that it's a little scary if you put the base on first and then try and pivot the table with all that weight going on one corner of the base. So it takes more people the way that we do it, but we don't have to worry about accidentally damaging the base or the client's floor in any possible way.
All right, to the window, like keep going, and stop. To the wall, back an inch. All right. Sorry. All right, start to go down. Keep going down.
We're good.
Yeah,
We're good.
Keep going. There you go.
Yep.
And the client didn't request that we install the extensions when we were dropping this off, but he did want us to put the hardware on underneath. So here you can really see a good example of how all that goes together with the threaded inserts and the extrusion. And here finally is a look at the finished product. So to recap, it's California Claro Walnut for the top with a dark tinted black resin, Canadian black walnut for the base, and then a clear coat of our Black Forest furniture oil over everything. And finally, to top it all off, we applied our new product, our sprayable graphene. And Charlie was feeling lazy. He didn't want to get up for the outro, but you guys have been complaining that you're not seeing... Are you yawning? Charlie. But yeah, you guys have been complaining that you're not seeing enough of him. He's here all the time. Like I've mentioned before, he's just taken more of a management role recently. So he kind of just sits back and tells everyone what to do. Right, Charlie?